Nathan Caldwell zipped up his leather duffel bag, stepping over the scattered baby clothes on the floor without a second glance. On the bed, his wife, Maya, 7 months pregnant and gasping through stress-induced tears, begged him to stay. "She understands me, Maya. You just complain," he said coldly, checking his watch so he wouldn't be late for Aubrey. He walked out the door, believing he had just freed himself from a heavy burden to start a glamorous new life. What Nathan didn't know was that by breaking Maya's heart, he had just declared war on Richard Sterling, a man who owned half the city and a father who never forgave a debt. The house on Elm Street in Evanston, Illinois, was supposed to be their forever home. It was a picturesque 4-bedroom colonial with a wraparound porch and a sprawling backyard perfect for the child growing inside Maya's belly. Maya Sterling, a talented landscape architect, had spent the last 2 years turning the property into a suburban oasis. She was 32, a stunning, fiercely intelligent black woman who had built her life around a philosophy of grounded authenticity. She liked getting her hands dirty in the soil, she liked quiet Sunday mornings, and she loved Nathan. Nathan Caldwell was different. At 34, he was a senior financial analyst at Bainbridge Mutual, a mid-tier wealth management firm in downtown Chicago. He was conventionally handsome, tall, with sweeping sandy blonde hair, sharp blue eyes, and an unmistakable air of Midwestern fraternity charm that had matured into corporate ambition. When they met at a charity gala 5 years ago, his drive had captivated her. He had grown up middle class in Ohio, constantly striving for more, hungry for the corner office and the country club membership. Maya had found his ambition endearing. She hadn't realized until much later that ambition, unchecked, is just a dressed-up word for greed. The cracks began to show during Maya's second trimester. Pregnancy had been physically grueling for her. She suffered from hyperemesis gravidarum, leaving her exhausted, perpetually nauseous, and confined to the house for weeks on end. Instead of stepping up, Nathan stepped out. It started with the classic excuses. "The Q3 audit is killing us, babe," he'd say, calling at 8 p.m. to say he wouldn't be home for dinner. Then it was mandatory networking drinks, client dinners, and weekend golf retreats. Maya, wanting to be the supportive wife, swallowed her loneliness and heated up her dinner in the microwave, rubbing her swelling abdomen and whispering to their unborn daughter that Daddy was just working hard for their future. But the subtle shifts in his behavior became impossible to ignore. Nathan became fiercely protective of his phone, sleeping with it face down under his pillow. He started caring obsessively about his appearance, dropping $2,000 on custom Italian suits and splashing on a new, heavy cologne that masked the lingering, powdery floral scent Maya had begun noticing on his shirts. The scent belonged to Aubrey Miller. Aubrey was 24, a newly hired junior marketing associate at Bainbridge. She was a quintessential influencer wannabe, perfectly blown-out platinum hair, expensive manicures, and a curated Instagram feed that projected a lifestyle far beyond her entry-level salary. To Aubrey, Nathan wasn't just a handsome older colleague. He was a stepping stone. To Nathan, Aubrey was an intoxicating escape from the heavy realities of a sick, pregnant wife and impending fatherhood. Aubrey didn't ask him to assemble cribs or talk about pediatricians. Aubrey stroked his ego, drank martinis with him at dimly lit rooftop bars, and made him feel like a titan of the universe. The devastating truth unraveled for Maya on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in October. Nathan had rushed out the door that morning, claiming an emergency board meeting. In his haste, he had left his everyday wool overcoat draped over the banister. Maya, trying to keep busy to distract from the aching in her lower back, decided to take the coat to the dry cleaners. As she routinely checked the pockets, her fingers brushed against a crumpled piece of thick, textured paper. She pulled it out. It was a receipt from the Cartier boutique on Michigan Avenue. Maya's breath hitched. Her heart began a slow, heavy pounding against her ribs. She smoothed the paper out on the kitchen island. Date, October 12th, yesterday. Item, love bracelet, rose gold, size 16. Price, $7,350. Payment, Visa ending in 4419, Nathan's private account. Maya's eyes squeezed shut. Her anniversary wasn't for another 6 months. Her birthday had passed, and her wrists were certainly not a size 16. A cold numbness spread from the tips of her fingers up to her chest. Shaking, she opened her laptop. She had never been the snooping type, but desperation clawed at her throat. She logged into their shared cell phone provider account, something she handled the billing for. She pulled up the call and text logs for Nathan's number over the past billing cycle. A single number appeared over and over and over again. Hundreds of texts a day. Hour-long phone calls at 1 a.m., 2:30 a.m., times when Nathan claimed he was asleep in the guest room, so his tossing and turning wouldn't wake her. Maya traced the screen with a trembling finger. She searched the phone number online. It was linked to a public Venmo profile. Aubrey Miller. Below the name was a transaction history. Nathan had sent Aubrey money with emojis attached. A champagne glass, a red heart, an airplane. Maya let out a guttural sob, dropping her face into her hands. The idyllic life she had painstakingly cultivated shattered into a million jagged pieces. Her husband, the man she was about to build a family with, was funding a secret life with a woman 10 years her junior, while she sat at home, violently ill, growing his child. She sat at the kitchen island for 6 hours, watching the rain beat against the glass windows, waiting for the sound of his key in the lock. Nathan walked through the front door at 9:15 p.m. He was humming quietly, his tie loosened, a faint, self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. The smirk vanished the moment he stepped into the kitchen and saw Maya. The lights were completely off, save for the harsh, fluorescent glow of the range hood above the stove. Maya sat on the bar stool, completely still. In front of her, illuminated by the pale light, was the Cartier receipt and a printed stack of the phone logs. "Maya, what are you doing sitting in the dark?" Nathan asked, his voice tight. He stepped closer, his eyes darting to the papers on the counter. The blood drained from his face, leaving his skin a pale, sickly white. "Who is Aubrey, Nathan?" Maya's voice didn't shake. It was terrifyingly flat, stripped of all emotion. It was the voice of a woman who had spent all her tears in the afternoon and was now operating on pure, agonizing adrenaline. Nathan swallowed hard. The corporate negotiator in him scrambled for a lifeline, a lie, an excuse. "Aubrey, she's a junior on the marketing team." "Why? Have you been going through my things, Maya? Because that is a massive invasion of privacy." "Don't do that," Maya cut him off, her voice cracking like a whip. "Do not try to spin this back on me. You bought her a $7,000 bracelet yesterday. You text her at 3 in the morning. You're sending her money for weekend getaways. Look me in the eye, Nathan Caldwell, and tell me you aren't sleeping with her." Nathan stared at her. For a long moment, the only sound in the house was the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. Then, something shifted in Nathan's demeanor. The panic in his eyes hardened into something cold, resentful, and utterly cruel. The mask of the loving husband fell away completely. "Fine," Nathan said, tossing his briefcase onto the floor with a heavy thud. "Yes, I'm seeing Aubrey. Are you happy now? You dragged it out of me." The blatant lack of remorse hit Maya like a physical blow. She wrapped her arms around her pregnant belly instinctively. "Happy? You're having an affair while I am carrying your child, and you ask if I'm happy? Oh, please, Maya, don't use the baby as a weapon, Nathan scoffed, running a hand through his hair. He paced the kitchen, his voice rising in volume. Look at us. Look at this life. You've completely let yourself go. All you do is complain about your back, or the nursery, or how sick you feel. I work 50-hour weeks to pay for this house, and I come home to misery. Aubrey makes me feel alive. She's ambitious. She's vibrant. She actually cares about my day. Maya stared at him, horrified. I am sick because of your child, Nathan. I put my career on hold to build this home for us, and you're punishing me for it? Because I'm not a 24-year-old party girl who strokes your ego? You've always been complacent, Maya, he sneered, leaning against the counter, crossing his arms. You like planting flowers, that's great, but I'm going places. I'm making partner in a few years. I need someone beside me who fits that life. Aubrey understands the corporate world. She understands me. So what are you saying? Maya whispered, tears finally breaching her eyes, hot and stinging. You're just throwing us away? Throwing your daughter away? I'll pay child support, Nathan said flippantly, turning his back on her. But I'm not doing this anymore. I'm suffocating here. I need space. He didn't wait for her response. He walked upstairs. Maya sat frozen, listening to the heavy thumps of him opening closets, dragging out his leather duffel bag, pulling hangers off the rack. He was actually leaving. Just like that. 5 years of marriage, erased for a marketing assistant with a Venmo account. 10 minutes later, Nathan came back down. He was packed. He paused at the door, refusing to look directly at her swollen stomach. My lawyer will be in touch about the house. I'll be staying at Aubrey's place in River North for now. Nathan, please, Maya choked out, the reality finally crashing down on her. The primal terror of being a single mother, the betrayal, the sheer shock of it all broke her composure. Don't do this. Not now. We can go to therapy. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, he said coldly. The door opened, letting in a gust of freezing October wind. Goodbye, Maya. The door slammed shut. Maya slid off the bar stool, her legs giving out. She collapsed onto the cold hardwood floor, her screams echoing in the empty, silent house. The emotional agony was so intense, it felt like her chest was physically tearing open. She curled into a fetal position, sobbing until she couldn't breathe. Suddenly, a sharp, searing pain shot across her lower back, wrapping tightly around her abdomen. It wasn't the dull ache of pregnancy. It was a violent, suffocating cramp. Maya gasped, clutching her stomach. The pain receded, then hit again, harder this time. Contractions. She was only 28 weeks along. The extreme distress was triggering premature labor. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through her grief. She dragged herself across the floor, her fingers scrambling for her cell phone that had fallen from the counter, her vision blurred with black spots. She managed to dial 911, screaming her address to the operator before the pain overwhelmed her, plunging her into a terrifying, agonizing darkness. When she woke up, she was in the sterile, glaring, white environment of Evanston Hospital. Monitors beeped rhythmically. IVs were taped to her arms, pumping magnesium sulfate into her veins to stop the contractions. A kind-faced nurse patted her hand. You're okay, sweetie. You and the baby are stable. We managed to stop the labor, but it was incredibly close. You need to avoid all stress. Is there someone we can call? Your husband. The word made Maya physically nauseous. She closed her eyes, hot tears leaking onto the stiff hospital pillow. No, she whispered. Not my husband. She reached for the bedside phone. There was only one person in the world she could call. a person she had fiercely protected Nathan from, keeping her background completely separate from their suburban life. She dialed the number with a shaking finger. It rang twice. "Maya." The deep, commanding voice on the other end answered. "Dad," she sobbed, breaking down completely. "Dad, I need you." Richard Sterling did not look like a man you wanted to cross. At 62, he stood a commanding 6'3", with broad shoulders, piercing dark eyes, and a neatly trimmed silver beard. He moved with the quiet, dangerous grace of a man who held the world in the palm of his hand. Richard had grown up in the brutal housing projects of Chicago's South Side. Through sheer, ruthless brilliance, grit, and an unmatched intuition for markets, he had built Sterling Holdings from the ground up. Today, his private equity firm controlled over $60 billion in assets, spanning commercial real estate, tech infrastructure, and banking. He was a kingmaker in Chicago. Mayors answered his calls on the first ring. Wall Street executives clamored for an hour of his time. But to Maya, his only child, he was just dad. When Maya married Nathan, she had made a strict, non-negotiable demand. She wanted a normal life. She had seen how the Sterling wealth attracted sycophants, gold diggers, and fake friends. She didn't want Nathan to know she was the heiress to an empire. She wanted him to love her for her. So, she kept her maiden name legally, but lived quietly. Richard, though deeply skeptical of the overly charming, ambitious white boy from Ohio, respected his daughter's wishes. He played the part of a comfortable, upper-middle-class retiree living in a nice condo. Nathan thought his father-in-law was a retired regional manager for a logistics company. Within 20 minutes of Maya's phone call, Richard's heavily armored black Maybach pulled up to the emergency entrance of Evanston Hospital. When Richard walked into Maya's hospital room and saw his vibrant, fiercely independent daughter looking so pale, fragile and broken, hooked up to a tangle of tubes, something inside him snapped. It wasn't a loud, explosive anger. It was an icy, absolute stillness, the kind of stillness that precedes a devastating earthquake. He walked over, his heavy footsteps silent on the linoleum, and gently took her hand. "Talk to me, baby girl," he said, his voice soft, hiding the murderous rage boiling beneath his skin. Through broken sobs, Maya told him everything. She told him about the Cartier receipt, Aubrey Miller, the cruel words in the kitchen, Nathan blaming her pregnancy for his infidelity, and finally, Nathan packing his bags and leaving her on the floor, which triggered the premature labor. Richard listened in complete silence. He didn't interrupt. He didn't curse. He just stroked her hair, his thumb wiping away her tears. "He left me, Dad," Maya whispered, her eyes closed, exhausted by the medication. "He just threw us away because I wasn't glamorous enough anymore. Because I was sick." "Rest now, Maya," Richard said, his tone carrying a weight that felt like a solemn vow. "You focus on my granddaughter. You focus on healing. I'm going to handle everything else." "Dad, don't do anything crazy. I just want peace." "I promise you peace, Maya. Sleep." Richard waited until the monitors showed Maya's heart rate settling into a deep, drug-induced sleep. He stood up, gently kissed her forehead, and walked out into the hospital corridor. The moment the hospital room door clicked shut behind him, the facade of the comforting father vanished, replaced entirely by the ruthless CEO of Sterling Holdings. He pulled his cell phone from his tailored suit jacket and dialed a number. "Harrison," Richard said. On the other end of the line was Harrison Vance, Richard's chief legal counsel and personal fixer, a man who specialized in making problems disappear, legally or otherwise. "Mr. Sterling, it's late. What do you need?" Harrison asked, instantly alert. I need a complete, microscopic dossier on a man named Nathan Caldwell. He is a senior analyst at Bainbridge Mutual, Richard commanded, pacing the empty corridor, his voice echoing like stone grinding against stone. I want his bank records, his credit lines, his career trajectory, his performance reviews, and his private communications. And I want the same for a woman named Aubrey Miller, 24, marketing department at the same firm. Consider it done. What's the objective, sir? Richard stopped pacing. He looked out the hospital window, staring at the distant, glittering skyline of downtown Chicago, a skyline he practically owned. Nathan Caldwell decided to discard my daughter like trash because he thinks he's a big man playing a big game, Richard said softly, the venom dripping from every syllable. He thinks he's climbing the corporate ladder. I want you to find out exactly what ladder he's on, Harrison, because I am going to buy the building, burn it to the ground, and make him watch from the pavement. Understood, Mr. Sterling. I'll have the files on your desk by 6 a.m. The next morning, while Maya was finally brought home by private nurses hired by her father, Richard sat in the cavernous mahogany-paneled office of his penthouse suite in the Trump Tower. On his desk was a thick, blue folder. Harrison sat across from him, sipping black coffee. It's all there, Richard. Nathan is highly leveraged. He's financing his new lifestyle on credit. He took out a massive personal loan against his stock options at Bainbridge to fund the designer clothes, the dinners, and that Cartier bracelet. He's banking everything on making partner by Q1 of next year. If he gets partner, the bonus pays off his debt. And Bainbridge Mutual? Richard asked, flipping through pages of Nathan's financial ruin waiting to happen. What's their vulnerability? They're a mid-tier wealth management firm. Solid, but they rely heavily on their anchor clients, Harrison explained. Their biggest account is the Vanguard Logistics Pension Fund. It makes up almost 30% of Bainbridge's total managed assets. A slow, predatory smile spread across Richard's face. He closed the blue folder. Vanguard Logistics, Richard murmured. CEO is Marcus Thorne, isn't it? Yes, sir. You played golf with him at Augusta last month. I saved Marcus from a hostile takeover 5 years ago, Richard noted quietly. He owes me a favor, a very large favor. Richard picked up his phone. The trap wasn't just set, the jaws were already snapping shut. Nathan Caldwell thought he was a player in the corporate world. He was about to find out he wasn't even on the board. He was just a pawn, and the king had just entered the game. For the first 3 weeks, Nathan Caldwell felt like a man who had successfully cheated death. He moved his custom suits and Italian leather shoes into Aubrey's trendy, exposed brick loft in the River North district. The apartment was a stark contrast to the quiet domestic warmth of the house in Evanston. Here, the air smelled of Le Labo Santal, 33, espresso, and the constant, thrumming energy of downtown Chicago. To Nathan, it smelled like freedom. He convinced himself that leaving Maya was not an act of cowardice, but a necessary pivot for a man of his caliber. He was a shark. He couldn't be tethered to a sick wife complaining about a nursery. When his lawyer informed him that Maya was refusing to contest the divorce filings and wanted no alimony, only full physical and legal custody of their unborn daughter, Nathan actually chuckled. See, he told Aubrey over a $300 sushi dinner at Nobu. She's finally being reasonable. I cut her a modest child support check every month, and we're free, babe. No dead weight. Aubrey smiled, trailing a manicured finger over the rim of her lychee martini. I told you, Nathan. You belong in the fast lane. Speaking of which, Sophia is renting a villa in St. Bart's for New Year's. It's only 15 grand for our share. We have to go. It's exactly the kind of crowd you need to be seen with before the partner promotions. Nathan's stomach did a brief, uncomfortable flip. $15,000. His liquid cash was entirely depleted. He had maxed out his American Express Platinum card, buying the Cartier bracelet and his new Rolex Submariner. He was currently floating his lifestyle on a high-interest personal loan secured against his unvested stock options at Bainbridge Mutual. But looking at Aubrey, at her perfect, demanding pout, he pushed the anxiety down. "Book it," he said smoothly, taking a sip of his Yamazaki whiskey. "Consider it done. I'm practically a made man at the firm anyway." What Nathan failed to realize was that Aubrey's affection was strictly conditional, tied directly to the balance of his bank accounts and the prestige of his title. She didn't want a partner. She wanted a patron. When Nathan came down with a severe sinus infection a week later and spent 3 days sweating through her expensive linen sheets, Aubrey didn't make him soup. She complained that his coughing was ruining her sleep and checked herself into the Langham Hotel, leaving him to order Uber Eats. The first real tremor of the impending earthquake hit on a rainy Friday evening in early November. Nathan was treating Aubrey to an apology dinner at Maple and Ash, a high-end steakhouse in the Gold Coast. They had just finished a dry-aged tomahawk ribeye and a bottle of Silver Oak Cabernet. When the waiter brought the leather checkbook, Nathan casually slipped his metal Amex card inside. 5 minutes later, the waiter returned. He leaned in, his voice discreet but undeniably humiliating. "Sir, I'm sorry, but this card has been declined." Aubrey paused mid-laugh, her eyes snapping to Nathan. "Declined? That's impossible," Nathan scoffed, his face flushing a deep, embarrassed red. "Run it again. It's a platinum card. There is no preset spending limit." "I did run it twice, Mr. Caldwell. The terminal instructed me to have you call your bank." Furious and sweating under Aubrey's icy glare, Nathan pulled out his backup card, a Visa tied to his private checking account at Chase Bank. He handed it over. The waiter returned 2 minutes later, looking even more apologetic. "Sir, this one is declining as well. A fraud alert code." "Are you kidding me, Nathan?" Aubrey hissed, dropping her napkin onto her plate. "Are you broke?" "No, it's a glitch," Nathan snapped, his hands shaking as he opened his banking app on his phone. He logged into his Chase account. His jaw dropped. His checking account, which should have held his $15,000 monthly draw, showed a balance of minus $430. A red banner flashed across the top of his screen. Account frozen. Pending audit of margin, loan collateral. Please contact the lending department immediately. Nathan felt all the blood rush from his head. His loan had been called in. But why? The collateral was his Bainbridge stock options, which were perfectly secure. Unless... "Nathan," Aubrey said, her voice dripping with lethal impatience. "Pay the bill. Now. People are staring." Nathan had to transfer money from his emergency 401k penalty withdrawal account just to cover the steak dinner. The ride back to the River North loft was dead silent. Nathan spent the entire weekend desperately calling his private banker, only to be met with automated out-of-office voicemails. He didn't know it yet, but Richard Sterling had spent the last week making exactly 3 phone calls. The first was to the CEO of the banking conglomerate that held Nathan's debt. The second was to the board of directors at Bainbridge Mutual. The third was to a private investigator, ensuring every agonizing moment of Nathan's downfall was caught on camera. Monday morning arrived with a suffocating, metallic tension in the air at Bainbridge Mutual. Nathan walked onto the 42nd floor, attempting to project his usual arrogant confidence. He adjusted his silk tie and marched toward his glass-walled office, ready to raise hell with HR about his frozen stock options. But the trading floor was eerily quiet. Analysts and associates, who normally greeted him with back slaps and stock tips, suddenly found their monitors incredibly fascinating. Nobody made eye contact. Before Nathan could even boot up his computer, his desk phone rang. It was the administrative assistant for William Bradford, the ruthless, iron-fisted managing partner of the firm. "Mr. Caldwell, William needs to see you in the primary conference room. Now." Nathan smirked, his ego blinding him to the obvious red flags. This is it, he thought. They're fast-tracking the partner promotion to keep me happy. They fixed the banking glitch. He strutted down the hallway and pushed open the heavy oak doors of the conference room. The smirk vanished. William Bradford was sitting at the head of the massive mahogany table. To his right sat the firm's chief legal officer. To his left sat the head of human resources. And in the center of the table sat a stack of thick, black binders. "Sit down, Nathan," Bradford said. His voice wasn't angry. It was absolutely, chillingly dead. Nathan slowly lowered himself into a leather chair. "William, what's going on? I had some bizarre issues with my banking this weekend." "I don't care about your banking, Nathan," Bradford interrupted, lacing his fingers together. "I care about the fact that at 6 a.m. this morning, Jonathan Hayes, the CEO of Vanguard Logistics, called me on my personal cell phone." Nathan's heart skipped a beat. Vanguard Logistics was his crown jewel. He managed their $800 million pension fund. "Jonathan Hayes informed me," Bradford continued, leaning forward, "that he is pulling the entirety of the Vanguard account from Bainbridge Mutual, effective immediately. Do you know what an $800 million capital flight does to a mid-tier firm like ours, Nathan? It bleeds us dry." "Pulled it. Why?" Nathan choked out, genuine panic finally breaking through his arrogant facade. "The portfolio is up 4% this quarter. I've been managing it flawlessly." He pulled it because he stated, on the record, that he has zero confidence in the ethical integrity of the fund's primary manager. You. Bradford slid one of the black binders across the polished wood table. It stopped directly in front of Nathan. "Open it." With trembling fingers, Nathan flipped the binder open. Inside were hundreds of pages of perfectly documented corporate fraud. It was a forensic accounting masterpiece, assembled over the weekend by Richard Sterling's personal legal shark, Harrison Cole, and anonymously couriered to Bainbridge's board. Nathan stared in horror at the high-resolution photographs of his expense reports, cross-referenced with Aubrey Miller's social media posts. "You expensed a 4-day stay at the Four Seasons in Miami as a client site visit," the chief legal officer stated, tapping her pen against the table. "Our audit shows you were there with your subordinate, Ms. Miller. You billed the firm for $3,000 in client entertainment at a nightclub. You used company servers to send confidential financial leverage data to your personal email to secure a private loan." "William, I can explain," Nathan pleaded, sweat beading on his forehead. "The Miami trip was a mistake in coding. I meant to pay that back." "Save it," Bradford snarled, his composure finally breaking. "You arrogant fool! You used this firm as your personal piggy bank to fund an affair with a junior marketing associate. You violated the fraternization policy. You committed expense fraud. And you single-handedly cost us 30% of our managed assets in one morning." "Please," Nathan begged, his voice cracking. The reality of his total ruin was crashing down on him. Without Bainbridge, his unvested stock was worthless. Without the stock, his loan would default. He would be bankrupt. "Give me a chance to fix it. I can call Jonathan Hayes. I can win the account back." Jonathan Hayes won't even look in your direction, Bradford said coldly. Nathan Caldwell, your employment at Bainbridge Mutual is terminated, effective immediately for cause. We are seizing your unvested equity to cover the fraudulent expenses. Furthermore, we are legally obligated to report your financial misconduct to the SEC. Your Series 7 and Series 63 licenses will likely be revoked. Nathan sat frozen. He couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. In less than 10 minutes, his entire identity, his wealth, his future, and his career had been annihilated. What about Aubrey? Nathan whispered, grasping at straws. The head of HR spoke up, her tone perfectly polite and utterly devoid of sympathy. Ms. Miller is currently in another conference room. We presented her with the evidence of her complicity in expensing personal trips to the firm. She immediately claimed that you, as her superior, coerced her into the affair and threatened her job if she didn't comply. Nathan's eyes widened in sheer disbelief. She said what? She threw you under the bus to save herself, Bradford sneered. It didn't work. She's being terminated as well. Now, hand over your keycard, your corporate phone, and your laptop. Security will escort you out of the building. 15 minutes later, Nathan Caldwell stood on the rainy grey sidewalk of LaSalle Street. He held a small cardboard box containing a framed photo of a yacht he didn't own, a pair of spare cufflinks, and a dead phone. The heavy glass doors of the lobby swung open. Aubrey marched out, holding her own box. Her mascara was slightly smudged, her face twisted in absolute fury. Aubrey, Nathan said, stepping toward her, desperate for any ally. Aubrey, listen to me. We can figure this out. I have contacts at other firms. Don't touch me! Aubrey shrieked, slapping his hand away. Pedestrians on the sidewalk turned to stare. You lied to me. You told me you were making partner. You're completely broke, and you dragged me into your stupid expense fraud. You gladly spent the money, Aubrey. You told HR I coerced you, Nathan yelled back, his own anger flaring. Because you're a sinking ship, Nathan, she laughed, a cruel, bitter sound. Did you really think I loved you? You're a balding middle management loser who just got blacklisted from Wall Street. Have fun paying child support on minimum wage. She turned on her Prada heel, hailed a yellow cab, and disappeared into the Chicago traffic, leaving Nathan completely alone in the rain. He had discarded a loving wife and his unborn child for a glittering illusion, only to find out the gold was painted on, and the paint was peeling fast. But the true horror was yet to come, because Nathan still didn't realize that his sudden, catastrophic bad luck wasn't luck at all. He didn't know that Maya's father was watching from a penthouse across the city, and Richard Sterling was only just getting started. The descent from corporate golden boy to a financial pariah took exactly 72 hours. Nathan Caldwell sat on the edge of a sagging, floral-patterned mattress in a dilapidated Motel 6 in Skokie, staring blankly at the stained carpet. His custom Italian suit was wrinkled, smelling of stale sweat and cheap coffee. His phone, a prepaid burner he had to buy after Bainbridge deactivated his corporate line, buzzed violently on the nightstand. He didn't want to answer it. Over the last 3 days, every phone call had been a new circle of hell. His private bank had officially seized his 401k to cover the margin calls. The SEC had formally opened an inquiry into his unauthorized use of internal servers. Worst of all, his desperate attempts to secure a new job had been met with a wall of sheer, impenetrable ice. Just yesterday, he had called Arthur Pendleton, the most cutthroat executive recruiter in Chicago, begging for a placement, even at a boutique firm. Arthur had laughed, a dry, scraping sound. Nathan, you aren't just fired, you're radioactive. Word on LaSalle Street is you crossed someone so big they made it their personal mission to salt the earth where you walk. Nobody is going to touch you. Lose my number." A heavy, suffocating dread settled in Nathan's chest. He had $34 to his name. Aubrey had blocked him on every platform and was reportedly already dating a real estate developer in the Gold Coast. The burner phone stopped buzzing. A moment later, a sharp, aggressive knock rattled the motel door. Nathan flinched. He dragged himself off the bed and peered through the peephole. A man in a nondescript grey suit stood holding a thick manila envelope. Nathan opened the door an inch. "Yeah?" "Nathan Caldwell?" the man asked. "Who's asking?" "Process server," the man said, shoving the envelope through the crack in the door before turning on his heel and walking away. Nathan tore open the seal. It was a summons for a mandatory mediation regarding his divorce and custody settlement. His eyes scanned the location. It wasn't the small suburban law office he and Maya had used to close on their house. Location: the Sterling Tower, 65th floor, downtown Chicago. Nathan frowned. The Sterling Tower was the most exclusive, heavily guarded skyscraper in the city, home to international conglomerates and billionaires. Why would Maya's lawyer be operating out of there? A flicker of arrogant hope sparked in his chest. Maybe she found out I'm broke. Maybe she's suing for alimony and got some shark on contingency. If she was dragging him to a fancy boardroom, he thought, he could talk his way out of this. He could put on the charm, play the victim, cry about how the corporate world had chewed him up, and convince Maya to let him move back into the Elm Street house while he got back on his feet. She was sweet. She was a pushover. She still loved him. The next morning, Nathan used his last few dollars to take the train into the city. He walked into the cavernous, marble-clad lobby of the Sterling Tower, his heart pounding. The security detail, built like linebackers, scanned his ID and silently escorted him to a private, gold-trimmed elevator that shot up to the 65th floor without a single stop. The elevator doors parted, revealing a breathtaking penthouse boardroom with panoramic, floor-to-ceiling views of Lake Michigan. In the center of the room sat a massive table carved from a single slab of black walnut. Sitting at the far end of the table was Maya. Nathan stopped dead in his tracks. She looked completely different. Gone were the oversized maternity sweaters and the exhausted, tear-stained face. She was wearing a stunning, tailored emerald green maternity dress. Her skin glowed, her posture was impeccable, and she looked at him, not with heartbreak, but with absolute, terrifying indifference. "Maya," Nathan breathed, stepping forward, ready to deploy his prepared speech. "Maya, I'm so glad you agreed to meet. You have no idea what they've done to me. I was set up. Bainbridge completely screwed me over. Sit down, Nathan." A deep, booming voice echoed from the corner of the room. Nathan froze. From the shadows of a massive bookshelf stepped Richard, Maya's father. He wasn't wearing his usual weekend khakis and golf polo. He was dressed in a bespoke, three-piece midnight blue Tom Ford suit. He moved to the head of the table, flanked by two men who looked like corporate assassins, Harrison Cole and another senior litigator. "Richard?" Nathan stammered, deeply confused. "What are you doing here? Did you drive Maya into the city?" Richard didn't smile. He pressed a button on the table, and the heavy oak doors of the boardroom locked with a definitive click. "I didn't drive her, Nathan," Richard said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying the weight of a natural disaster. "I own the building." Nathan blinked. He looked from Richard to Maya, then to the platinum lettering etched into the frosted glass wall behind them. Sterling Holdings, Office of the Chief Executive. "Sterling," Nathan whispered, the blood draining from his face as his mind frantically tried to connect the dots. "Sterling Holdings. Richard Sterling? You always were a superficial reader of people, Nathan, Richard said, taking his seat at the head of the table. You looked at my daughter and saw a naive gardener. You looked at me and saw a retired, middle-class logistics manager. You were so busy looking up at the corporate ladder, you never bothered to check who owned the ladder. The realization hit Nathan with the force of a freight train. Vanguard Logistics pulling their account, the forensic audit of his expenses, the immediate termination, the frozen bank accounts. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't a coincidence. It was you, Nathan choked out, his knees buckling slightly. He gripped the back of a leather chair to stay standing. You destroyed my career. You destroyed my life. I simply handed your employer a mirror, Richard corrected coldly. You chose to steal from your firm. You chose to spend your days in hotels with your subordinate while my daughter was hospitalized, fighting for the life of my granddaughter. I just accelerated the consequences of your own disgusting arrogance. Nathan collapsed backward into the heavy leather chair, the fine Italian wool of his wrinkled suit suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. The breathtaking panoramic view of the Chicago skyline stretching out behind Richard Sterling, a city Nathan had arrogantly believed he was destined to conquer, now looked like a towering fortress that had locked him out. The silence in the cavernous black walnut-paneled boardroom was absolute, broken only by the faint, high-altitude hum of the skyscraper's ventilation. He looked desperately around the table, seeking a crack in the armor, a sliver of sympathy. He found none. Harrison Cole, the litigator, sat with the relaxed posture of a butcher who had already finished his day's work. Richard Sterling sat perfectly still, his dark eyes radiating the cold, immense gravity of a black hole. But it was Maya who broke Nathan's mind completely. "Maya, please," Nathan begged, his voice cracking into a high, reedy pitch that echoed pathetically off the frosted glass walls. He leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table as if it were a life raft. "You have to listen to me. I made a mistake. A massive, stupid, catastrophic mistake. I was stressed out at work, and Aubrey, she manipulated me. She preyed on my insecurities. But I'm still your husband. I'm still the father of that baby. You can't let him do this to me. You know my heart, Maya. We can go to therapy. We can fix this." Maya didn't flinch. She didn't look away, and she certainly didn't cry. She rested her hands gently on the emerald green fabric draped over her swollen belly. When she finally spoke, her voice was a terrifyingly calm and resonant melody. It was the voice of a woman who had walked through hell, burned away her illusions, and forged herself into steel. "You really don't hear yourself, do you, Nathan?" Maya asked softly. "Even now, sitting in the ashes of your own life, you are still playing the victim. Aubrey didn't manipulate you. You sought her out because she was a shiny mirror that only reflected your own bloated ego." "Maya, that's not—" "Do not interrupt me," she commanded, the sheer authority in her tone snapping Nathan's jaw shut. "You left me on the kitchen floor, Nathan. You packed your bags and walked out the door while I begged you to stay, knowing full well I was severely ill. You told me I was a burden. You told me my pregnancy was an inconvenience to your networking schedule. The stress of your abandonment triggered premature labor. I almost lost our daughter that night. I almost lost my own life." Nathan stared at her, the blood draining completely from his face. I didn't know. Maya, I swear I didn't know you went to the hospital." "Because you never checked," she replied, her dark eyes piercing right through his hollow excuses. "You never called. You were too busy buying champagne with the money you were stealing from your firm. You didn't outgrow me, Nathan. You just couldn't handle the weight of something real. You wanted a curated, filtered life, and the moment it required actual character, actual sacrifice, you ran. I don't need you, and my daughter will never, ever be exposed to the kind of cowardice that lives inside your bones. Richard leaned forward, placing his hands flat on the table. The shift in his posture drew all the oxygen out of the room. Your marriage is over, Richard stated, his voice a low, geological rumble. That is not up for negotiation. What we are negotiating right now is the remainder of your miserable, pathetic life. Richard nodded to Harrison. The lawyer smoothly slid a thick, meticulously tabbed binder across the polished black walnut surface. It stopped exactly an inch from Nathan's trembling hands. Beside it, Harrison placed a single, crisp legal document and a heavy Mont Blanc fountain pen. "These are the final terms, Mr. Caldwell," Harrison said, adjusting his glasses. "The single document on your right is a voluntary relinquishment of all parental rights. Full legal and physical custody will be awarded solely to Maya. You will not request visitation. You will not contest the divorce. You will agree to a permanent, legally binding non-disclosure agreement regarding Maya, Richard, and Sterling Holdings. You will cease to exist in her life, effective the moment the ink dries." Nathan sneered, a desperate, feral flare of defiance rising in his chest. He pushed the document back an inch. "And if I refuse? You think you can just bully me into giving up my kid? I'll take it to family court. No judge in Illinois is going to strip a biological father of his rights entirely, just because his father-in-law has deep pockets. I'll fight you." Richard actually smiled, though it was a terrifying expression devoid of any warmth. "I was hoping you would say that. Harrison, open the binder." Harrison reached over and flipped the heavy cover open. "If you refuse to sign, Mr. Caldwell," Harrison explained with chilling clinical precision, "we will immediately hand over the contents of this binder to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the FBI, and the Internal Revenue Service. While Bainbridge Mutual fired you for expense fraud, our forensic accountants dug significantly deeper into your private accounts over the weekend. We found the offshore shell company you set up in the Cayman Islands 3 years ago to hide your stock dividends." Nathan stopped breathing. The room began to spin violently. How could they possibly know about that? He had paid a dark web broker thousands of dollars to ensure those accounts were untraceable. "It's textbook federal wire fraud and felony tax evasion," Harrison continued, tapping the page with his finger. "We have the routing numbers, the IP logs, and the email correspondences. The minimum mandatory sentence for these combined federal charges is 7 to 12 years in a maximum security penitentiary. By the time you get out, you will be in your late 40s, a convicted felon with millions in restitution debt, completely unemployable even at a fast food restaurant." Nathan stared at the undeniable proof of his complete ruin. He had absolutely nothing left. No money, no allies, no leverage, and no escape. "If you sign," Richard added, his tone utterly devoid of mercy, plunging the final dagger into Nathan's chest, "my team has arranged a one-way, coach-class ticket to Boise, Idaho. We have acquired a low-level data processing subsidiary there. You will be employed as a junior data entry clerk. It pays $38,000 a year. You will live quietly in a studio apartment we have secured for the first month. You will never set foot in the state of Illinois again. That is my final and only offer. Federal prison or complete, humiliating exile." Nathan's hands shook so violently he could barely lift the Mont Blanc pen. A hot, stinging tear of bitter, absolute defeat spilled onto the mahogany table as he dragged the nib across the dotted lines, signing away his rights, his marriage, and his dignity. He didn't look up as security escorted him out of the boardroom, a broken ghost of a man stepping into an elevator to nowhere. 2 months later, as a heavy, serene blanket of winter snow fell over the bustling streets of Chicago, Maya Sterling gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl named Chloe. The delivery room wasn't filled with the chaotic anxiety of her past life. It was filled with warmth, world-class medical care, and the unwavering, protective presence of her father. Maya never returned to the suburban house on Elm Street. Empowered by her true identity, she moved into a sprawling, historic estate on the North Shore. With her father's backing, she launched a massive philanthropic foundation, using her landscape architecture expertise to build sprawling green spaces and community gardens in Chicago's most underserved neighborhoods. Meanwhile, nearly 2,000 miles away, Nathan Caldwell sits in a gray, windowless cubicle in Boise, Idaho, inputting endless columns of numbers into spreadsheets for a company he despises. He lives strictly paycheck to paycheck, eating microwave dinners in a cramped apartment. Late at night, under the harsh glare of his cheap laptop screen, he obsessively scrolls through business and society websites, torturing himself with glimpses of Maya. He sees her hailed as one of the city's most influential and radiant philanthropists, glowing with a happiness he could never provide. In the suffocating silence of his exile, Nathan realizes the ultimate, agonizing truth. The glamorous, elite life he thought he was chasing was actually the one he had blindly walked away from.